Hello, everybody. I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Georgiana.
And this is Wholehearted Loving, where we teach you simple tools for self-love and compassion to grow the muscles you need to be with big feelings, triggers, and overwhelming sensations in your body.
Whether you have active challenges in your life or relationships, or whether you're just here to learn to be kinder to yourself, we pull out all the little things that make life feel better, the things that give you a sense of hope and direction.
So if you're too hard on yourself or on others,
if you want to feel real, deep connection in your life and relationships,
even if you want to reprogram your inner critic while you're sleeping,
this is a great place to be.
So welcome, and we hope this episode brings you just the tidbit you needed today.
Enjoy the show.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. Today, we're going to be walking you through how to enjoy the highs without bracing for the lows when you could be in a place of enjoying highs instead. You can find self-reflection prompts for this episode and every episode on our Instagram at Wholehearted Loving. And you can learn more about us and how to practice with us live on our website at wholeheartedloving.com. Before we get started, we'll do a body-based self-connection practice to connect with ourselves before we connect with each other and this podcast.
That was so sweet. I saw your hand. It was like you were like presenting. Like, here she is.
Here she is.
Body connection practice. Okay. So this is a bit of a fun one that I like. And I don't feel like we've done this in a while, and not in this context, I don't think. So I always like playing with metaphor and pairing metaphor and movement together. So this is a fun one we can play with and see. So there's different ways to start it, but this is my funnest way, the way I like the most. So I'm going to tell you what that is, and you can see if you like it too. I'm going to feel my butt on the seat, and then I'm going to rub my hands together and create a bit of energy. And maybe you notice a sound, maybe you notice some temperature, some warmth created, and then just sort of bring some space in between your hands. So just hold your hands, like, I don't know, I think I have my hands 20 centimeters apart. I don't know what that is in inches, just a little bit apart, like you're holding a little ball, an energy ball. Maybe you feel some sensation there, maybe you don't. But what we're going to do is we're going to draw out, like you're making the ball bigger and bigger, and draw out your arms however far you want to. It doesn't have to be a big ball. And then you're going to close that ball again, make it small. And your arms can go in any direction that you want. And this ball just gets to go small, become big. Maybe you want to look at one of your hands each time your hands move. If you want, you could even pair it with breath. So for me, I like to inhale when my ball becomes big, and exhale when my ball becomes small. And to add another layer to this, if you want, see if you can find some pleasure and enjoyment in the making of the ball become big, and in the making of the ball become small. And noticing how that is for you. Right? What you liked about it, what felt nice, what felt weird, what was uncomfortable, all good noticings.
Well, not to be too self-aggrandizing, but I feel like God doing this exercise. I'm creating the Big Bang and entropy just with my hands.
Just with your hands. Yeah. You're a powerful lady.
That's right.
And that's all you need to do is just play with your energy ball.
Right? Huge amount of mass of invisible energy turning into this tiny ball.
Mm-hmm. And then you could place your ball somewhere if you need to. You could launch it somewhere if you want to, or maybe it's sort of just, poof. Maybe it big bangs and turns into, I don't know what.
Yeah. Like that. That always reminds me of Qigong and moving energy. I mean, it just feels to me, energy feels very tangible. So it's nice to put some conscious focus there.
Yeah, I think for sure there's like Qigong elements in this kind of movement. And why I chose it was I know that we're talking about being with highs and lows in life. And so highs and lows to me are about contrast, right? So the contrast of like big and open and wide, and then like smaller, right? More compact. And that it doesn't stay in any of those two places for too long, right? It just sort of dances back and forth. And then we also played with like, can you find pleasure or something pleasant about each part? Right.
Well, I can now, but let me tell you, there was no pleasure in change before. I needed things to become a certain way and stay that way forever. And then, of course, it would feel stagnant and weird, but I would grip onto it and be unhappy.
And how fun was that? And how much energy did that take?
Luckily, I largely can't remember because I was so dissociated. But the visceral sense is there of that's not a nice feeling. It's a chasing feeling, and then it's a disappointed feeling. And it's a controlling feeling and an impossible feeling.
Right? A chasing, gripping, controlling, right? So, maybe we could play this way. If you wanted to, Steph's my little guinea pig here. Imagining what it's like just to come into presence with, like, I know how to dance with contrast now. I know how to be with change now. Like, just tracking how that feels in the body as you're presencing to that knowing, right? That's changed for you. What do you notice just coming to that knowing, but on a body level?
A wash of relief. And I think I've said this before. Thank God. Thank the Lord that I've found this.
Right. And so right now, what we just did with Steph, she was open to playing, was like intellectually, you could tell us like, oh gosh, it wasn't like this before. I was like gripping and controlling, and I don't quite remember, but I imagine it probably felt like this. And so we went with, what is it like just to connect to the knowing that it's not like that anymore, that you can be with the highs and the lows, right? You can be with the dance back and forth. And for you to not just intellectually recognize that you can do that, but check in with the body of like what happens in your body as you pause with that knowing, that acknowledgement. And like you felt something.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, you got extra.
Yeah. Yeah. More drops in the bucket. Yeah.
More drops in the bucket.
Feelings. Yeah. And there's an interesting but really subtle difference of the words that came were like, oh, I survived. And the way that would have felt before was like, oh, well, I survived, like this hardened, sarcastic, facetious, screw you to the world kind of a feeling to it. And now it's more this sense of like wonder and simple pleasure and like a bit of curiosity about what might come next.
And that, wonder, simple pleasure, curiosity about what might come next. Like to a regulated system, those three words or those three, sort of ideas, they feel sort of pleasant. Yeah. But to a system that's not accustomed to that, like that can actually feel quite scary. The idea of connecting to wonder and like the unknown. And I forgot the other thing you said. Yeah. But like I'm recognizing now, like those three things, those ideas you just shared are things that bring for you a pleasant body feeling now.
Yeah.
Right. So not only can you access them in your mind and is it not only a mindset and a way you see life in the world, it feels pleasant in the body to be in those states.
Yeah, it really does. It's a night and day difference for whatever reality I'm creating for myself. Really, the foundation of that in the past used to be that feeling that I described a minute ago, that feeling of controlling and hardness and sarcasm. Whatever underpins those. Like, those are the words I've chosen to describe the sensation that I can feel, that I can remember feeling. Yeah. And the difference there between what underpins now is like such a nice, simple, not charged feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which reminds me of like how we came to this idea for this episode in the first place. Is it was very much feeling based. So can I tell the story of how this episode came to be?
Yes.
So Steph and I got on this call, right, to prep for recording a podcast. And I looked out the window.
Right.
And I would like to report right now that none of the fluffy clouds that I saw earlier are there.
Are you okay? Yeah.
I'm okay.
Can you be with that? Yeah.
I can be with that. I can be with there's some clouds in the distance, and I can orient to a lot more blue sky. And that feels okay. And all of this will make more sense after I tell the story. But I looked out the window and was like, experienced, pleasantly surprised with this moment of delight. Like, I think if you would have been here, you would have seen just the smile come across my face. And I think, I don't know, I probably made some cutesy little sound of delight.
You had a laugh that was like an archetypal, curious delight laugh of a child. You were like, ha ha ha.
Yeah. Like, that's what I mean. That's why what you just shared made me think back to that moment, because those were the qualities of the feeling of that moment, like a lightness, a wonder, delight. And it was because I said to Steph, and like the words couldn't come quick enough to really make it make sense, but I'm like, there's a cloud outside and it looks like Mickey Mouse hat. It was a cloud that looked like a Mickey Mouse hat. And like, I don't know why that made me so excited, but it excited me. And then I was excited that something like so simple could excite me. And I just took it in. I'm like, oh, and I told Steph about it and had a moment of good feeling. And then we carried on our conversation to prepare for recording. And then I looked out the window later, like it wasn't like, oh my gosh, I wonder if it's still there. I hope it's still there. Like, I just looked out the window. And then another moment of delight and like surprise and like pleasant surprise. I'm like, oh, it's gone. Stephanie, it's gone. And now look, there's like an airplane, like one of those play school squishy fat airplanes in the clouds. And I was delighted by that. And I was like, oh, that feels really nice. And then there was a moment where I looked to, well, what happened to the Mickey Mouse hat? And it just morphed into something else. And like, that was okay. I was like, oh, okay. Let me enjoy the airplane because the airplane is here now. And again, look away, carry on our conversation. And later I look out the window again and sort of had a little snicker, like a little like snicker to myself. I'm like, huh, of course. The airplane's gone. But what I saw was like this leaping bunny from this other cloud. I was like, that is so cool. And I was so pleased that I got to enjoy these 3 separate moments, like just for the moment that they were. They didn't last very long. The clouds changed fast. And I wasn't attached to any of them. Yeah. And like the fact that they went away, like I was just, let's orient to the next thing. Yeah. And obviously, like, this is not like a life hardship that Mickey Mouse hat in the clouds went away. But it was a good reminder for me, the importance to grow the muscle, to be able to be with what's nice, pleasant, decent, delightful in the moment and enjoy it for what it is. And like, see it as this isolated moment that doesn't need to have more, and I can still enjoy it. Yeah. And I know Like I wasn't sitting there consciously thinking, well, this Mickey Mouse cloud's going to go away. But like, I'm sure on some level I knew that. But I was really focused on, how cool is that? And then, oh, it's gone. There's something else that's new. And that flow of feeling in the body is so nice to get to experience. Like this is not about clouds, but it was about the feeling in the body is so pleasant to just go from delight to delight to delight, even though the initial delights went away.
Yeah. It's skill building to get to that point, right? Like there's two things coming up for me right now. And the first is babies. So a baby might have cried that Mickey Mouse cloud was gone. They might have had a fit. They might have been inconsolable. And we normalize that with memes of, oh, the baby's crying because I won't let them, do something they obviously can't do for danger reasons or whatever. So
like drink from the puddle?
Yeah. They can't drink this bottle of motor oil. They're crying because we won't let them. That wiring is in there, right? Like we're having some natural emotional response of like, oh, the cloud is, oh, it's gone,
Yes.
And I saw that in you. You had a moment of like, oh, like you just sit up a little bit straighter and then it turned into, oh, but now it's something else, And we have that experience too with babies where you can maybe distract them for a moment with a little toy and then their tears will turn into delight, All that programming is still running.
Yes.
And I don't know if it's a good point here to say it, but it reminded me of all the meaning making and story occupation that would have consumed me in the past.
Can you say more about that?
Yeah. The example that came up for me while you were describing your Mickey Mouse and the airplane and the leaping bunny clouds were encountering a hot man at a grocery store. That's what came up to me. And in the past, it might have been like, ooh, there's a hot man. I better see him down another aisle. I better arrange to see him down another aisle and,
I've never done that before. What are you talking about?
All of these things. And then
it was the library though, not the grocery.
Yeah, wherever it is, they're everywhere, these men. There'd be a series of paths that this could take, right? It could be like, oh, notice he has a wedding ring. All the stories I realize in an instant that I've made up about our magnificent future together are dashed. And now I'm
not going to be your husband all of a sudden?
Again. Yeah. Still not. Or, like I could become fixated on that. I could get, if I'm not paying attention, my brain can go all kinds of places and just stay there in a very unhelpful fashion. So I could be mulling over all of the, oh, I wish I had spoken to them, or why didn't they speak to me? Why aren't we married yet? I'm running through a whole relationship that went poorly in my mind. And before you know it, the day's over. And that's how it's been for me,
Yeah.
So now I can actually just enjoy a glimpse of a hot man and then get on with my life. And you may or may not encounter the thing in the future, but you're certainly going to be then open instead of preoccupied to whatever life is actually bringing me,
Yes. Yes. It's such a different way of living to get to just enjoy what's present instead of getting all in our head about how something should be instead. Yeah. And like, I think we all know what that's like to live in that way. That reminds me, I have a similar man story like that. I remember I was like, consciously, like intentionally single for like many years after, hard things happened. And I was like starting to feel like, maybe I'm open, but I wasn't willing to put any effort into meeting someone or anything like that. And I remember one day at the gym, I was like, who is this man? This is a nice looking man and a kind man, and the energy feels good here. And I was like, oh, that's pleasant. But I noticed how fast it became well, should I stay in the change room a little bit longer? Because then maybe it'll be the same timing as when he leaves. And, who knows? Maybe and we'll see each other in the parking lot. I don't know. And I just laughed at myself, like in a loving way. I'm like, oh, see, there it goes. Like trying to like make it into something more.
Yeah.
And I think there's a difference between just living your life and being present to what appears. And like, if an opportunity presents, engaging and extending, that's very different than let me scheme and think about how many minutes I should hang in this change room and like listen to see if I hear the door of the men's change room. Right? Like, it was so neat to catch myself in that. And then I remember being like, oh, like it's Thursday again. I wonder if he'll be there.
Oh, it just takes over. It completely takes over.
And so when I started noticing the pattern, I'm like, okay, like, and then I was like, oh, like, I wonder what he's like in this kind of setting or that kind of setting, or, like just consumes your mind. And I was like, I don't really want to be consumed in my mind with this fictitious, I don't even know what, right?
Yeah.
But I saw it starting to happen. And I decided, let's from now on just notice how it feels if we're in each other's presence. And if it feels good, what is it like to enjoy that feeling? Like, so sometimes we talk about hockey or I don't know what at the gym. And like, I noticed a very distinct difference in that I was just enjoying the moment. It wasn't like, oh, what should I ask him next? And what should we say? And like, should we talk about that? I know that that's happening in his life. Should I mention that? Like, it was just, let me just enjoy how I feel around this person.
Yeah.
And like, nothing has to happen beyond that. And it will have been a pleasant moment.
Yes.
And the larger takeaway, the larger enjoying that I got to have through that experience was, I thought, because at some point it was obvious, like I wasn't interested in pursuing anything. He wasn't. It was just like a pleasant people interaction that feels nice, right? And I'm like, how cool is it to recognize this is what my heart feels like opening again, awakening again? Like that is like, and like, it doesn't mean I'm going to marry this person. I don't even know if they're single.
Yeah.
Right? I don't even know if they'd be interested. But like, to just enjoy that, like, oh, this feeling shows me my heart's waking up again a little bit.
Yeah.
Just that in itself for myself is so meaningful and such a pleasant feeling that my old self, I don't think would have been able to enjoy that, because I would have been like, oh, like what else can I find out about him? I could ask the trainers about him, and like, oh, do we have things in common? And it would just go and get bigger and bigger, and like, oh, like, are you going to say something to him? Like talking to the trainers, and, and like, and they're like, oh, I know you're single. I know they're single. Like, I'm like, no, it doesn't need to be that. Like,
that's a dramatic snowball, right? Like we do these dramatic snowballs to express this giant energy that we've got.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I was like, what if I allowed myself to feel a giant energy? A giant energy right now is that, holy crap, like my heart felt closed and dead for so long because it needed to be. And it's starting to wake up. And how exciting is that? And how nice does that feel? And can I just let myself enjoy that? That's what's happening right now. Not that I need to spend all my free time dreaming about this fantasy land that doesn't actually exist.
Yeah, totally. This is, so the being with, and we mentioned this last episode, the sort of cyclical chasing of emotions that so many of us have been conditioned into, where if something's feeling bad or low, we're redirected towards something pleasant. And when we're feeling something good or pleasant, we're being warned about the bad thing that might come next. So we create this cycle for ourselves. And I think you could add to that this dramatic snowball description that you're talking about, right? It's not chasing to the low, not talking yourself into a story of how this might go wrong, although maybe you could do that as well. Instead, it's this over dramatizing of a not yet extant event, where we're trying to create more of those good feelings. So all of these are methods for not being with. They're methods for pushing ourselves somewhere else, chasing something, being chased by something, avoiding whatever is in the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right? Like this happens a lot when we talk to people where they tell us, oh, I went on 2 dates with this person and they were such wonderful dates. And then I didn't hear from them anymore. Like, what does that mean? Does that mean this? Are they like playing with me? Are they this? Are they that? Like, I don't understand. Like, how could someone show up that way or not show up? And you can feel their energy like getting all into a huff and getting all into like, I need to analyze and make sense of this. And like, how should I be the next time they reach out? Like, should I be like open or should I be pissed and whatever? And it's, I think, so important to remember or to ask ourselves, like, how does it feel to be in that energy? Right? Does it feel pleasant to be in that energy? Do I want to be more in that energy? Right? What might it be like to imagine being able to enjoy those 2 dates and look back at those 2 dates and say, wow, those were wonderful dates. They were wonderful because I felt this way in their presence. They were wonderful because they showed up like this and that brought out this part of me. And I realize now what I find important in seeking a partner. Mm-hmm. Right? And those were 2 wonderful dates. I always call it a stranger plus 2 dates. Really, that's all it is. Can you enjoy that it was a stranger plus 2 dates? Instead of it's a stranger plus 2 dates and now all this emotional turmoil.
Yeah.
Which
Can
is so
you handle my objections?
Yes, I can handle your
I'm sure many lovely, like-minded listeners are plagued by the same events that happen in my mind. And I had this experience actually the other day going back through, I'm doing an NLP practitioner training where we had to go back and remember some positive events. And I found, so I have got these positive events in mind, but they're immediately tainted by this, like the reality of that moment turned into something unpleasant later. So now the good feeling is like tarnished.
Yes.
And I have trouble separating those. I wonder if you could talk a bit about that.
Yeah, so maybe we talked a little bit about this last episode, but like that's really common, right? But what you're recognizing is when you say, I'm having trouble separating those 2 moments, you're already aware that there's 2 separate experiences.
Yeah.
Right. So right now, like if you're looking at me, you see that I have 2 hands held out. Right. So I might say, oh, like, what is it like to recognize that you feel 2 different ways about that situation? Right. And then we might explore like which pathway is most familiar to you to hang out in and explore. And for the sake of exploring something new and growing a muscle, are you open to exploring the other pathway and hanging there for a bit? And you don't have to be. Like I always like to remind people, there's no right or wrong answer. It's like for you to choose. But even in my presenting of the question that way, it's to help you see more clearly, oh, I feel 2 different ways about this. And I could focus on this way of feeling about it, or I could focus on that way. And like, or I could focus on the familiar and then hang out in the new, or I can hang out in the new and decide I don't want to hang out in the familiar right now.
Yeah. So parts of that I can access, and then parts of it raise more objections. So I guess I've got some notion internally that there probably is, and maybe I just can't bring to mind when it's time to do these exercises, like a pure, untainted happiness feeling. Whereas I'm looking at a happiness feeling that now when I feel the happiness, it's sort of paired with like a feeling of disgust.
Right.
Because the new reality is there. So I'm wondering, I guess, for people who either don't have or can't access a pure, like what I'm calling a pure good feeling, can they still do this sort of work with?
For sure. It would be, you know, I'd probably check in and say, you're noticing some disgust and some happiness. which part are you open or willing to hang with more first, right? Like there's something about being presented choice.
Yes.
Right? If I'm like, you should hang out with what's pure because it's there,
Yeah.
that we might be met with resistance, right? If someone says, well, I think I want to hang out with disgust, let's hang out with disgust. And then we might go to, there's so many different ways of working with this, but one thing I like to help people be present to is, how long does it feel good to hang out in disgust? Can you track how your body lets you know that? Yeah. Is it starting to shift? Like people tell me like, oh, I'm sort of tired of it now, I'm done.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, now that you're done with that, are you open to hanging out with a little bit of that nicer feeling, or do you just want to like look outside for a bit?
Yeah.
Right? And like
the choice makes a huge difference. Even so, me being able to identify those parts in myself, just having you say out loud, do you want to hang out and discuss? Like, it's immediately obvious that I don't. But before you said that, it was like a cyclone that I couldn't extricate myself from.
Yeah, I think that part is so important, is to not make disgust wrong, and also to not make hanging out with it wrong, and to like highlight that you have a choice and neither is right or wrong. They're just different. You're going to feel a different way. Because that's the skill we're trying to build, is that in my own life, I start to recognize more, oh, this moment holds a bit of disgust and a little bit of like pleasantness. Oh, okay. If I wanted to choose right now which one to orient to and pay a little bit more attention to, feel a little bit more like, which one am I choosing? And then just hanging with that.
It's wild for me how much of a visceral difference there is from that. If it's not articulated, it's like I'm automatically doing the bad feeling thing. I'm like wrapped up in it. And the moment it's articulated that there's a choice, it just unlocks something internally. And like, that's not, that's the thing I can do on my own, but I need to be introduced to it. Like, I would not have produced that notion in a vacuum by myself.
Yeah, right. But you knew enough to say, I think I experienced both. Or like, I hang out in disgust and I don't want to hang out there anymore. Like, do you have any suggestions? Like, that is a sign of health and wellness, right? To be able to notice it is not enjoyable what I'm experiencing right now. And I don't know the answer, but I'm open to asking someone, right? And sort of implied in your asking of someone is at least some smidgen of hope, of possibility of something different. Because if you completely believed it wasn't possible to experience anything different, you wouldn't bother asking for help.
Yeah.
Right. So, so those are really special moments too. Right. And like going back, even before we explore whether you want to sit with disgust or something more pleasurable, I might ask you like, hey, Steph, like, how is it just to know that you're able to recognize that both exist? Like, wow. Like, what do you notice in your body knowing that you have the ability now to recognize that not only do you feel disgust, there's at least a tiny part of you that recognizes there's maybe something a little bit nice here. What is that like to know?
It feels more roomy. And it feels more hopeful and less like a trap. I think I'm often describing this sort of thing as like a feeling like being in a cage and trapped versus being on a springboard with all these possibilities.
Yeah.
It's and like I couldn't have enjoyed any of the nice feeling.
Yeah. Right. So it feels a little bit more roomy. I might ask you like, are you open to hanging in that a little bit longer? Is there some part of that feels pleasant? And if you said, oh yeah, like part of that feels pleasant, we might hang that in there a bit, and that you get to sort of get a little bit more familiar and comfortable with what roomy feels like.
And it really cleans up the memory feeling, There are memories I can go back on that just make me go, ugh, like every time.
Mhm.
And if I run this process, I'm going to call it, of, making space for all the feelings, there was a reason I was in whatever situation now causes me to go, blech. Like when I was 10 and I kissed that boy on the cheek, and then for years after I'd wipe my mouth and be like, ugh, I can't believe I kissed his cheek. I should actually spend some time and go back and feel all the good feelings of that and how lovely
Yeah.
and sweet it was,
Yes. Right. It holds more than that. I have a moment like that of, I was at a high school volleyball game and I was like so excited cheering for my friends playing that, like, I don't know, I just yelled out something, but it was like poor timing. Like it was like right when she was serving or something, and I think she messed up the serve, and I felt horrible for like decades after, like decades. Like it was this yucky feeling like, oh my gosh, I messed that up, because I was only oriented to the yucky feeling. I messed that up for them.
Yeah.
Right. And then later, as I, grow these skills, I'm like, oh, what? Like there was also some other flavor there, which is pure excitement and full expression, and like being just such a fan of your friends, like such a cheerleader for your friends. Like, what is that like, to recognize that that was also there in that moment? Right? What is that like, between the two of like, I messed it all up for my friend, and like, wow, I'm such a cheerleader for my friend. Like, which one do I want to hang in for a moment? Right? And like now that memory has a different feel to it, because like we were talking about last episode, widen the lens to include the other part of it that I couldn't access for so long, because I was more in the cycles of like shame, and inner critic was loud and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like this a lot.
Yes. So can I talk a little bit about the ups and downs of life and a little drawing I used to draw for people?
Yeah.
I wish that, and maybe one day we'll figure out how to be more techie, but I used to work in an office where I would see people, and I had this whiteboard, and it was like a magical place, this whiteboard. And I would just draw these things. I don't know what they were, but somehow it would tie in an image with like the concepts we were talking about. And I remember our office manager, she would say, I love coming in after your done session with clients and just hanging out and checking out the whiteboard, because it's so neat what's on there every time. So anyways, this is something I drew often because I think many people deal with this. I would draw, I don't know how you might describe it, like a wavy line that sort of starts at a baseline and it goes up and it reaches a peak and then it starts dropping. And then it'd come back to sort of baseline again and it'd go up. And so just sort of like rolling waves. And I would present that as, just imagine that's your life, right? And most people can like connect to the idea that life has ups and downs. So that was, the representation of life's ups and downs. And I would ask people, how do you usually feel when you're at the lows? They're like, oh, horrible. I hate that feeling. Like, okay, great. Good to know. What about when you're at the highs? Like, oh, that's not nice either, because I'm like ready for it to come down again. Like something like the other shoe's going to drop or something else is going to come, or that good feeling's not going to last. And like, I don't feel good there either. Okay, thanks. Good to know. And then I'd track them on the downhill. Like, how does that feel when you're coming from a high down to a low? Like, oh yeah, that's horrible. I hate that feeling. Okay, good. So then I would highlight it. And then I would ask them about that uphill of when you've reached a low and things are starting to get better, right? Like, how does that part feel? They're like, I don't actually usually notice that part. Like, oh, that's interesting. Okay. And then they might say, and if I did, I wouldn't believe maybe that it would actually get better.
Perfect.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So now I'm like circling the part where they're in the low I'm circling the part where they're coming up and it's starting to get better. And I circle the peak and I circle the coming downhill. I'm like, okay, did you notice that in all of those 4 places you said that doesn't feel good? Right. And we have a good relationship, so we can bring a little bit of lightness and humor to it all. And I'm like, so then I draw this big circle around the whole image. I'm like, so this is your life. Now, how does that feel to know that this is your life? And that at each 4 of those points, like none of them are feeling good for you, right? The muscle to be able to find some goodness in each of those parts of everyday life, it's not well practiced yet. And the side effect of that is that you walk through life, regardless of whether you're on a high or low or somewhere in between, you don't feel good. How is that? And they're like, oh, that's sort of sad. Like, no wonder I feel depressed, or no wonder I feel defeated, or no wonder I feel overwhelmed. Like, what if we could practice and help you grow the muscle to enjoy when something is going well? And know that that feeling is going to change and you're going to dip again in the next day or 2 or a week. And that's okay, that you're okay with that feeling of coming down. What if we could help you grow that muscle of when you're down in a low, that you could be with it, you could call in support, and you could also step back and look at that wave and see that every time there's been a low, it's gotten also better at some point. And what if you could enjoy that, knowing that it will shift again? What if you grew the muscle to notice when it's starting to get a little bit better? And you could feel some relief in that. Well, how might that life feel? And like, people still might be resistant because people might get caught up in the, well, how? How will I do that? And we always park the how for that's a great question and we can work on that. But like, how would it feel for you if you had those muscles trained? And like a big smile comes on people's faces because they want that. They're not having fun living life the way where no part of it feels particularly good. Right? What if like you could like put in the piggy bank when you're at the high? Let those moments fill your piggy bank. So when you're at a low, you have a buffer. You have something that holds you because you've had all these other moments that felt good. They don't make your pain go away. But like your life is not just oriented to all the pain. How might that feel? Yeah. Right. So just a different way.
A very different way, and a very important way, and a way that is doable with practice and attention. And these simple tools, the feeling of it, you know, when you're talking about us wanting to know the how right away, it's like we're wanting to have the wheel without having first had the idea for the wheel. You know, the feelings and the thoughts are going to precede whatever the doing is. Mm-hmm. So this is why we're practicing being with and feeling and learning what our bodies are telling us.
And the connecting to the want for it. Like, what might it be like to be able to do that? Like, how might it feel to like live a life where you can like take moments of goodness and really feel them and enjoy them and allow those to be a resource for you during moments of challenge? And when you can connect to, oh, I would love that. I would want that. That would feel really like reassuring. That also helps us while we're learning the how and we're building the skills when it feels clunky and hard sometimes, right? To remember, oh, I know the why. It's because I want to have that feeling in my life.
Yeah. That's another, I'll insert my previous attitude, which would have been like, yeah, sounds nice. If you can get it, like, great. Thanks. Glad you think that's possible. And I want to reiterate that that's enough, that somebody else thinks it's possible, that I'm willing to believe someone else thinks it's possible.
Yes. We say that a lot to people because we can tell when people's resistance is present. sometimes people will outright tell us, but other times we can just tell body language wise and energetically when there's a lot of resistance. And we will offer, like, would it be okay while you do not believe this yet? And that's okay. You can have your own timeline, that we hold the vision for you, that this might be possible. All right. That it could be possible.
Yeah.
We've never had someone say no. Right. And when we offer it in that way, we don't put pressure on them to believe it or make them wrong for not believing it yet, people feel relieved. And like, it's almost like a reparative experience, because they get to experience someone in their corner saying, you don't see it yet, but I see this for you. I see that you deserve this, and I see that you're capable, and you don't know the how yet, but I trust in it unfolding for you.
Yeah. So nice.
So, yeah.
Nice, Gigi. I like that. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to say about this before we do a closing practice?
Something came and then something went.
Such
I don't know if it will come back. We'll see. Maybe it went and it will stay away. Yeah.
I'll share a little moment of evidence of love and care. This is the thing that happens sometimes when we're recording. I'm in a shed in my yard, and our wood pile is maybe 10 meters away. And one of my housemates will need to cut wood, but he knows I'm recording, so he does these tiny chops. He's trying not to make too much noise. I can hear him out there with his tiny chops, so I want to liberate him to be able to swing freely.
So can we play with this for a moment?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. What is it like to notice that there's someone who cares so much about you and the value of your work, that they want you to have firewood also? They care enough about your comfort in your home, but also about your work. And they want to prepare wood for you and, the household in a way that doesn't disrupt you as much as it could. What is that like to just presence to? What do you notice in your body just knowing that?
Well, it's a very sweet feeling of being considered and mattering.
So I'm just jotting this down. I love it. Sweet feeling of being considered and mattering. So you told us just before we practiced that, the knowing of what's happening, like you can hear what's happening outside. You intellectually know that this person is showing care. And that's great. Building that muscle of like reporting, I can recognize there's a moment of care happening here in my life. And then we played with it, like, what is it like to notice that though on a body level, which that sweet feeling of being considered and to matter. My guess is that's a different feeling when you're just thinking about it, having a heady knowing.
Oh, you just right over top of it. Just bypass that whole thought altogether. Isn't that nice? Carry on.
Yeah, right? Okay. And that in itself is already a skill, right? That many of us are needing to practice. I had to practice that a lot, to look for what's good and be able to just intellectually speak it out loud, to know that it was happening, to catch it on my radar. But this is another layer, right? And so today you got to feel a sweet feeling. You got to feel what it feels like, a sweetness in your body where you're feeling considered and like you matter. And what's cool on so many levels is, like, on one level, it's cool because now you can associate, if you want to, this body feeling with this person and your relationship. And the other thing you can associate this to is, I enjoy when I feel this way in connection with people. So when you go out into the world and you orient to, like, future potential partners or friends or people who you partner with for work, like, you can have that knowing of, this is what it feels like in my body, that sweetness of being considered and like I matter. And you can start recognizing it when it's present or not present with people, and using that using that as at least one source of information when you assess who and what you want to have in your life or not.
And again, thank God, because what I was oriented to in the past, and therefore which became my whole experience, was that my feelings don't matter and I'm not considered. So consciously, unconsciously, whatever, that's the experience I'm going out and expecting to find. And lo, I found it, I needed these other examples to know that they were possible and to feel them so that I could recognize them as they're happening and contrast them with the previous.
Yeah. Right? When you contrast with the previous, it seems like this is a little bit of a theme. When you're telling me you contrast it with the previous way of feeling, the previous mind patterns, like it's very clear to you what feels better and like what feeling experience you want to have more of.
Yeah.
Right? But like we need contrast, but we can't have contrast unless we practice looking for what's different. And when we look for what's different, the interesting thing is we find it, even if it's very small. We find it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gigi. It's really sweet.
Mm-hmm. Really sweet.
Do you have a closing practice in mind?
What closing practice? Okay, yeah. I have a practice. I think I can find a way of how it ties, but it's a movement of the body, gentle movement. So just finding what your body is supported by right now. I'm supported by the ottoman. I can feel it. And like, this is the movement I want to make, which is reaching arms up high. I'm looking up. And then I'm just letting the arms sort of fall by my side and like sort of just push outward a little bit. And you can sort of repeat that feeling and you can find the movement that feels best for you. But in this movement, what I feel is a little bit of like a cleansing movement. Like, oh, there was a thing here. Oh, it's finished. And I make space for whatever's coming next, right? There's a nice moment. The moment's over. What's next? There was a hard moment. The hard moment's over. What's next? Right? Yeah.
It's almost creating a door frame, a threshold with your hands, stepping through it.
Yeah. Right? I like this movement too. It's a little bit different, which is when I do it, there's different versions of this, but I'm not going to stand right. I'm just going to sit. It's a little bit like doing maybe the breaststroke when you're swimming, like from the center, you push open and you pull open to the sides and you sort of lean your body forward a little bit. It also reminds me of in the 90s, those talk shows where they did makeovers.
Yeah.
And like people like darted through the construction paper.
Yeah.
Whoa. But like, it's like this emergence. It's like, oh, what's next?
Yeah.
Which is a very different feeling. Like if you play with this feeling of, oh, what's next, right? Combined with a little bit of wonder and curiosity, is a very different feeling than chasing a certain feeling or like clinging on to something, right? It's I'm sort of ready, especially when you compare these two movements together, like this cleansing and opening up space movement, and then this peeking through, right? Like, oh, what's next?
Neat. Yeah, when you describe it, like I want to make a point about our personal associations with movements and like practicing these things for yourselves and seeing what comes up. Because we're doing slightly different movements and they're having different meanings for us, right? When we're doing this breaststroke-y movement, for me, that more has a feeling of like the just keep swimming. So it's sort of an unending trudge feeling. But when you tell me it's, we're bursting through the construction paper on the makeover show, that's a totally different feeling, right? And that's the association you've got with that movement. Whereas for me, it's this trudgy feeling. This is what's partly so neat about doing all these exercises is finding what changes your state or what elicits what mental association for you.
Right. So can we play with this a little bit more? I think it's so cool that you're sharing this. Okay. So if you're open to like being in that trudgy movement either a little bit or just imagining it, and if you were to like, let's just pretend, or maybe I'll ask you, do you want to be in more of the trudgy feeling, or do you want to explore what it feels like to shift into something different?
Shift into something different.
Okay. So see if you can move your body in a way that gives a different feeling than trudging. What might it be? What might it turn into? And you might need to try some things. I'm laughing because, Steph, your whole energy just changed. Your face lit up. Something softened and sank in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how is this feeling to notice and hang in, right?
Yeah, that was a nice, relaxed feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what's cool is, whenever we lead people through practices and, things like priming the body for peace or whatever facilitation we're doing, we always like to stress this is not about following instructions, obeying what someone tells you should do. We are already all very good at that. This is about trying something out and noticing how it feels in your body. Notice whether you want to hang in that feeling, because sometimes we might want to hang in trudging. If you notice, hey, I'm quite avoidant to that feeling, right? Maybe I want to learn to like be with that feeling a little bit more. And maybe what I want is to start feeling what it feels like to trudge and then emerge into something different because I don't know that feeling very well, right? Mm-hmm. Or maybe I want to feel what trudging feels like and then what resting feels like. And I want to sort of dance between those two so that my body knows life doesn't have to be about trudging all the time. Sometimes we need to trudge, but like what might it be like to trudge and rest a bit and trudge a little bit more? Maybe even notice when you do it that way, trudging starts to not feel like trudging anymore. Like, I don't know, but like, that's what the exploration, that's what's so cool about it is you can discover all sorts of things, right? So I think it's very neat that we associate different things with different movements. Different things feel good, different things don't feel good. And it's really, again, all about choice. What would you like to feel more of? Are you open to seeing and discovering what helps you feel more of that? And then if you discover something that feels pleasant or decent, is there any part of you that wants to hang in that a little bit longer, right? You don't have to, but now you have the option to.
I love it. Mm-hmm. Thanks, Gigi.
Mm-hmm.
That's it then for this week.
That's it.
That's it.
Ta-da!
Ta-da! All right. Thank you guys for being with us as always. Please do like, follow, and subscribe. And if anything we've said here today has been helpful for you, please share with somebody that you care about. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.